my blood pressure level and my triglycerides and all those, they started to drop. Too often I got to places where I didn't pull the trigger on becoming vegan, and I found excuses even though I knew how science worked. Plants have all the protein you need. My competitions have not suffered at all. I've been a competitor for 30 years, and over the last 4 years, I've been as strong or stronger than I ever have been.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Viva podcast. You're here with me, James, and today we'll be interviewing Ryan Steels. Ryan is currently the captain of the Vegan Strong powerlifting team. Some of Ryan's achievements include the 2021 IPF Masters World Champion Best Lifter and World Strongest Vegan 2021. We're going to speak to an incredibly strong human being today. I hope that you can take something from it, because I definitely will. Enjoy the watch. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today, Ryan. I'm really excited for this conversation. Not every day you get to speak to a vegan powerlifter, so yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm always open to helping people understand exactly what it is we do and why we do it.
Yeah. With that, I think we should just jump straight in. Can you just tell the people watching what exactly a powerlifter is? Because I think they know the term like bodybuilding, that kind of thing. What differs in powerlifting?
So powerlifting is 3 base lifts, right? You have the squat, the bench, and the deadlift. You're given 3 attempts in each one of those disciplines, and the best one that you do in each one goes to your total, and that's how you are gauged. So if you do a local or a state meet, meaning province style, you normally go by just the total, and you win an overall for your weight class. And weight classes are broken up by normally about 10 kilo jumps that you have in there. Once you get to like the world level, then you're competing in each one of the disciplines, and you're competing in the overall. So you could medal in, say, the squat, but not medal in the overall. So it does get a little bit more fun as you get to the larger contests.
I see. What was it that made you become a powerlifter in the first place? Like, if you could just tell us a bit about your story and how you got into that sport.
Yeah. So I started out in high school. So I was always an athlete. I started running track at 7 years old. My father was a college track coach and a track and baseball person. And I was a smaller kid. I mean, I competed 120 kilos now. Back then I graduated high school at I probably weighed 65, 70 kilos at that time. So I wanted to be a bigger person. So I started training as an athlete at a young age, traveled around running track and playing football, American football. And I was probably 15 years old and went to our weight room in our high school. And the coach there was also my biology teacher, but he had been coaching since the 70s. And he said, "You're athletic, you should give this a try." And so I did. My junior year and senior year in high school, I did it, and I was not all that good. He used to tell me that if I really wanted to be good in this sport, I had to put on some size, because I was about 5'10", 5'11", as I am now, and at that weight was not competitive. So he said, "You're going to have to be at least 100, 110 kilo class to be competitive." So by the time I was 20, I started taking it a little bit more serious in college. And then in 2000, I won junior nationals. And that was my first national competition, first national win. And I had gotten up to a 90 kilo class by that time. But yeah, so it was really me just being an athlete and wanting to I always like pro wrestlers, right? I'd watch the pro wrestlers on TV and I thought, wow, I'd really love to be like that. But I was built like more of the managers. So
So in that time, like when you first started to when you won the junior nationals, how long was that time period? Because that's quite a lot of size you put on in that time, right?
Yeah, so from 15 years old till I was 23, so about 8 years. So I put about 8 years on to do that. And then after 2000, I competed in the Opens for a couple of years. And then I had realized that I'd really not been as athletic as I wanted to be. So I took some time off of powerlifting, played American football in the minor leagues for about 7-8 years, and I do a contest here and there. I kept my training up, but it also made me a little bit more limber than I had been, because I had really just concentrated on when I'd given up playing football and running track and then doing powerlifting. I became just a powerlifter. Getting back into sport and being able to run and jump, and at a weight of about, it's probably about 115 kilo, 110, 115 kilo, and playing football, played outside linebacker and running back. And then I finished up with that, and I realized at some point I wasn't going to be able to keep doing this. I mean, I was getting older and everyone else in the sport was getting younger. So that's when I decided to come back to powerlifting, and that would have been about 8.5, 9 years ago. I came back in my late 30s. So
I see. And during this time, had veganism ever been on the radar before? Like during this time when you were training and lifting, or when did veganism come into your life?
Yeah, so I think the first time I lived in Wisconsin, which is in the middle of the U.S. By the Great Lakes, known for their dairy, so dairy cows and farms, and that's what you had, and the square meal was that you had to have some sort of big piece of meat to go with a vegetable that was normally doused in butter. And that's kind of how you came up, and that's what we knew. And this is back in the 80s, early 90s. And then once it got to be right around, say, the early 2000s, I started to play around with the fact that so a lot of my studies in college were philosophy and Eastern philosophy, and so I got into Buddhism, Taoism. Started looking at pulling back on some of the meat intake and all, but I couldn't figure out how I would be able to do that, still become the athlete that I wanted to be, and do all the things I wanted to do. So this is what led us to kind of where I am now. But I had tried pescatarian, I had tried vegetarian, and I would go to a certain point and I would lose so much weight and so much strength, and I just thought, this isn't the time for it. It isn't the time for it. Until I got to that point to where it was the time.
Yeah, awesome. That's a really interesting path, that it was kind of philosophy in your studies that made you consider it more deeply. Was there any initial hesitation towards, like, maybe you were thinking, okay, veganism, maybe it's better morally, but can I really be strong? Can I really be the same person as a vegan?
100%. Yeah, it was very scary, which is often what brought me to kind of that brink. Like, I would do it and I realized that I wasn't able to keep up with what I wanted to be able to do athletically. I just didn't feel I didn't feel I was the athlete I was, before. And so it really was a balance of, what was I willing to give up and all, until about 5 years ago, when I decided that I was going to go forward with it and I was going to find a way. And, and it was just, it's like anything else, you only really find out what you can do when you take away all the rest of the options.
Yeah. And what was it that was that final catalyst that made you think, right, I'm done. I'm going to go vegan?
For me, a lot of it came down to the ethical treatment of animals, and just seeing what, and it's weighed on me for a long time. And I know there's people out that, I've spoken on different platforms about, how it is to be, manly and be, an American, and, all these different perceptions that are out there. And I did fight some of those, thinking that, I can't be this, and then am I really living into who I should be, and what does that look like? And I got to the point to where I said, if it takes my career away, it takes it away. If I can no longer be an elite lifter, then I can't. I had a good run at it, but this is more important to me. But I also understood science. And I think that having some really great people around me helped. So when I got in those situations while I was starting out, I did utilize the people around me to get to those next levels and break through the barriers that I didn't really know. And like I said, now I do live on the West Coast. So I'm out in Portland, Oregon, which is in the Pacific Northwest. It's easier to be of a vegetarian vegan diet out here than it was in Wisconsin.
I see. And what would you say the most difficult part was to becoming vegan? What was your initial biggest challenge?
So I think the biggest thing for me initially was, how am I going to get the calories in that I need? Because when I had started out before, I'd eat pretty clean, and I would start to lose weight. And I did this time also when I decided that I was just going to do it. I started eating and I started losing weight. Like I dropped probably 5 kilos in the first month. And I thought, this is killing me. Now, most people would hear that and they think, wow, that's amazing. You lost 5 kilos in a month. But for what I was doing and to keep the calories up where I needed them to be and to be, as strong as I could possibly be, I needed to be able to maintain a certain caloric balance. And so when I was doing this, I found some of the people that were around me. I'd mentioned before, I had a very close friend. His name is Aaron Adams, owns a restaurant. He's written several books. He's a vegan chef, amazing person. But he was one of those that he had been a vegan for a number of years prior. So when I was talking about, I just can't, I'm trying to find things that I can eat. And so he brought me, into more like the tempeh and fermented foods. And so that opened my eyes there. Patrick Boheman, who's done some powerlifting and bodybuilding, been a vegan for, a number of years also, reached out to him and I said, hey, I can't get my calories where they should be. And he's like, well, what are you doing as far as like the oat milks and the nut milks and taking the calories from there that you don't necessarily have to consume like you would think. And so I'm like, I really haven't thought much about that. And so we got into more of that side. And then I started studying on my own and looking at, some of the pea proteins, and some of the sponsors that I had were not necessarily, they're more whey protein, all this. So I started looking for other sponsors and people that, started looking at the same views that I had, and realizing that there's a lot out there. So as I started to educate myself and then utilizing the resources of the people around me, I found I could still do this, and maintaining where I am wasn't as big of a deal, because it's also that the aging side, right? And I wasn't a young man when I did that. I mean, I was probably, what am I, 47 now? Yeah, so I was probably 42 and had been lifting back at it again for a number of years, and I was still, in the U.S., for USA Powerlifting, I was a top 6, top 5 open lifter still for my class. So I was still at a high level. And then when I was in the Masters, I was, I think, a returning world champion. And I decided I was going to do this. So people thought that was kind of a crazy move. Also,
Yeah.
like, hey, you're really still hitting the stride, hitting numbers. But little did I know that things would go up from there.
Yeah. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit. What has veganism done for your performance? Has it dropped a little? Has it stayed the same? Have you improved? How does your body feel now that is it 5 years vegan?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, so once I was able to figure out the macros portion of it, it was great. And so I'll back up a little bit. Some of the things that I saw was, my blood pressure level and my, triglycerides and all those, they started to drop and get into these great ranges. Kind of the unintended consequence, right? The things I wasn't necessarily leaning towards, but then my doctors, like, originally they thought maybe they're going to put me on statins, and then now it's not even part of the conversation. And then he asked me, he said, well, what have you changed? And I tell him, and the first doctor I told, he goes, well, that's probably not it. And he said, there's got to be something else that you're changing. And I thought, I'm not lying. I'm not making this up. I don't get paid to tell you this. But then I went to another primary care physician about 6 months later, and they checked all my numbers and everything looked great. And they looked at my history in my file and said, it looks like, you had some issues here. And I said, yeah, I did. And I gave up meat completely. I went vegan. I had no dairy, anything. And that doctor said, yeah, that'll do it. Just knowing like where I came from and where I was. So that to me is a great one, because that's a firsthand account, right? This is not me saying, I heard one time that this happened to somebody. This happened to me, And then with my lifts, part of it, I think, was I wanted to prove a point, so it also started to refocus some of my training. And I went, and during that time, I think my bench stayed about the same. My deadlift stayed about the same, and my squat just recently PR'd. And so somebody
Wow.
who's been training for 30 years to have any form of PRs without gaining weight, any of those pieces, it's pretty rare. It's pretty rare, especially if you're doing that over a long period of time and you're at a high level.
Yeah, that's very true. I just wanted to to ask, what does a vegan powerlifter's PR squat look like?
This was 320 kilo.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really, really heavy.
Yeah. Yes. 320 kilo squat. My bench is right around 205 kilo. And my deadlift right now is probably close to about 350. I've been as high as 360. Yeah, I've done 360. But yeah, as of recent years, I'd say I'm probably close to 350.
And would you say the squat is the lift that you're most proud of in terms of numbers, or?
I think it is based on. I mean, I've done more in my deadlift, but I've always been a really good deadlifter.
Okay.
But the squat portion is one where I didn't realize that I could still grow there, and so that's one that really did make me happy, because I'd kind of been. It's slowly increased over these last years. But then, yeah, to finally be able to have that meet where I could put that in it. And the number is big in the US because that's 705 pounds.
So, yeah, I would like to look into it a little bit. What does a power lifter's training session consist of in terms of, is it high intensity all the time, or is it higher, lower reps? Yeah, if you could just talk us through what that would look like.
Yeah, so I think there's stages, right? And there's fields of where you are. And so in your off season, you may do things that are similar to like a bodybuilding style where you're a little bit higher reps, your intensity has dropped a little bit. But within like the last 12 weeks leading up to a contest, you will be like, I train 3 to 4 times a week, normally 3 times a week. And once again, this is also because I've been doing this for a good amount of time. But so I'll have a day where I'm dedicated to my squat. So I may do squats and then do like belt squats, maybe some good mornings. The next time I'll come in, maybe I'll do my bench, and I'll bench and deadlift together. So I may bench, have a session there where I'm going up to 180, 185 kilo. Maybe I'm in like doubles there. And then I'll switch over my deadlifts, and then I'll do my deadlifts on that same day. And then I'll do my last day, be like some auxiliaries, which could still be like, let's say I've got stiff leg deadlifts and maybe SSB box squats. So there's any variance that you could have in there, but you're really trying to lift those core lifts at least one time a week, and then an alternative to those lifts a second time. Then if you have anything else left over, that's what you use. Now for me, I'm 120 kilo. I'm a father of 3 and husband. I've got 2 jobs. I've got my day job, and I've got my training business and things that we do with we own our own gym, Odd Barbell. So I've got plenty of things going on. So I have to prioritize not only my training but family time and work and all those pieces. So yeah, it's finding that balance.
You said 120 kilos. That's a big frame to fuel. What would your kind of daily diet look like?
So for me, I like to do, on a regular day, I'll have a wake up, have a protein shake, which is normally going to be 50, 60 grams of protein. And for me, it's going to be organic pea protein. And so I'll take that. And around 2 hours later, I'll have breakfast. So for me, breakfast would be banana, peanut butter, often do an orange. Sometimes I'll take you've seen some of the different meats that people have. So like a vital wheat gluten type of meat or a tempeh. I'll have that. Then I'll do a couple hours after that, another protein shake, but I'll also have probably hummus and pita with that. Then I'll follow up with dinner. Dinner for me could be, we're very, very open on things that we have. So we love, because I've got a family, myself, my wife, we got 3 kids. So feeding that many people, you'll do some bulk things. So like we're big on pastas, right? So do pastas. Make your own pizza is a huge one for us, whereas I will consume a pizza. So things like that. Normally it's going to be my post-workout meal. That one would be.
Sure.
I also will have a protein shake after that. So probably 2 hours after dinner, I'd have a protein shake. And based on where my calories are and where my body weight is and where a contest is and how intense I'm training, dessert for me is normally a bowl of cereal. So
Okay. I see. What kind of cereal would it be?
there's a couple ones that are like by Kashi has a couple that are like the vegan friendly, or vegan cereals, where you do like a peanut butter is always a good one. Yeah, so any of those that are also have kind of a higher protein in them possibly, but yeah, it's I'm a cereal person too. I love cereal. If there's anything like toast and cereal brings me back to being a kid. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's like cereal. Is it a meal? Is it a snack? Or is it
yeah,
both?
exactly.
I think.
Yeah, if I've had it multiple times in a day, I don't know what it would be. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, you mentioned family a couple of times. I wanted to kind of understand how it was for you when you transitioned to veganism. How was it generally perceived by your friends, your family? Obviously, you do a sport that's considered to be one of the most manly sports, and then you all of a sudden turn around and say, I'm going to become vegan.
Yeah.
What was their reaction to that?
Yeah, I think my wife has always backed my play. I mean, she's wonderful because she didn't go vegan. Like she is less meat now than she was, but I've always been one of those where it's very hypocritical of me if I were to say something to her when it took me many years to get to where I am now.
Yeah.
Right. So I've had
Yeah.
people that, how could you, be around people that are not vegan? I'm like, well, I was a people that wasn't vegan, and
Very
many of
true.
us were
Yeah.
that way. Very few of us came along and were raised that way. So for me, that was a big portion. So she supported it 100%. In the lifting community, that was where it got to be. I had enough chops in the sport, right? So that people weren't going to say, "Oh, you're throwing it all away," but they were really interested to see how it happened. What was this going to look like? And then they would think, well, he's not going to stay with it. He'll do this for a while, but we'll see. Or then we go out to eat, for during a meet, and they'd notice like, oh wow, you really are just ordering like there's no meat on your plate at all, and you're not even drinking milk, and you're not doing, and for them to actually see it, and then we'd perform, and they'd realize he's the same guy. Ryan's still the same performer that he was, an athlete that he was before. And I think that's one of the reasons I wanted to do it also, to show that it's not a matter of, I'm going to do this and all of a sudden all these bad things happen to me, but I can do these things and be the same person I am, feel better about myself internally, and be able to move on, with my life in a direction slightly, divergent from where I was.
Yeah. And have you seen any of those people have taken advice from you, and have any of them looked into veganism through your inspiration?
It's interesting to see how many people come out of the woodworks and say, I thought about this and I thought
Yeah,
about,
that's
doing
true.
this, but I wasn't sure what it was going to look like. And I think we all can say it's tough to go on with something when you've never seen it done. Right. But the more you see it and the more it becomes commonplace, the easier it is to say, well, I'm willing to transition into this because I've seen it. I've seen these people do it. And at first it was like, yeah, you can do that, but no one who's good has done that. No one that's been a top level person has done it. Then you realize, oh, okay, so there are top level people doing it. Yeah, but who really does it? I mean, those are all younger kids and they were great anyhow. And then you start seeing older people who are top level. Okay, well, that's fine, but they're normally smaller than you see bigger people. So the more and more that we see this, the more commonplace it is, the more I get people that reach out to me and say, I think I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it, and, what do I need to know? And I put that open line out to most people on social media and those that take advantage of it, I hope it's worthwhile. But if people don't know how to start off or how to get into that or where those challenges are going to come up, I can tell you where they were for me and others that I've worked with. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I wanted to go into a little section. I put it out there to the Viva supporters to ask questions that they might have for powerlifters, bodybuilders, people in the industry who are also vegan. The majority that came out for powerlifters is in terms of performance. So one of them, I think you've already covered it briefly, but maybe you could just go into it a bit more in depth. So one of the questions was, to gain muscle and strength, what would you say are the 3 best exercises and why?
To gain strength as a
It's to
powerlifter,
gain, I
or
guess to gain strength and gain muscle are different things,
okay,
right?
yeah.
Let's go with strength. Yeah, what would be the three best exercises?
So I think this. So I always go towards primal movements, right? What are things that humans are supposed to do and supposed to be good at, right? We squat down all the time. So the squat to me is a great lift. The deadlift is right there also because your posterior chain on your deadlift really is activating quite a bit of motion or quite a bit of muscular activity. So those are two that I say are great. Now, most people would think I would say the bench press is the other one, but the bench press is a very specific lift, right? You're laying on your back and you're pressing something upwards on a straight bar. It's normally not as applicable to things that we do, but I would say dumbbell press I think is great because you can change angles. You're able to get your range of motion change. You're working on balance unilaterally. So I think dumbbell press would be great also. So I think those three are the ones that I normally look to, and then variants thereof. But yeah, that's what I would say.
Awesome. I definitely didn't think you were going to include the dumbbell press. So that's, I've taken knowledge from that as well. Yeah, another question that we had was if someone is stuck on a lift and they can't seem to improve, say their bench press, what could they do to help get past that wall?
A lot of it comes down to the variance, right? So we look at single plane motions that we do for competition, like the bench press, and we say, I'm really good at this one thing. We have to understand that to make it, especially over time, when you're hitting these peaks and valleys, and you're just like, I just can't get past this plateau. Changing things like the angles that you're at, changing where your hand position is, changing the bar that you use. Like I also, I've been a lifter, but I also have coached for 25 years now. So things I have my athletes do is they rarely will use the same bar more than one time a week. So if they're benching, they'll bench with the stiff bar or the straight bar when they're doing their competition bench. But then they're going to have another day where they're probably using dumbbells and another day where they may be changing tempo and have a different bar in place. So all those things are helping because now you're recruiting new muscles that you wouldn't necessarily have recruited before, and you're utilizing stability, which is always great from a guy who's got to go in for a shoulder surgery here probably soon. But yeah, the more that you can utilize those pieces, the better you are. And that's how people have these careers that last over decades and they still are performing at a high level.
Wow. Okay. That's really interesting, actually. What do you think the impact of powerlifting has on the body? Is it mainly positive or are there negatives as well?
I think like any sport, there's the sport itself, which is mainly positive, right? Anybody that is getting out there and becoming active, powerlifting can be done at any age. My son, he lifts a little bit. My daughter did her first meet when she's now 18, but she did her first meet when she was, I think, 9. And so she had been out there and just wanted to do it. This is kind of the family business. And then having seen people that I know in their 70s that are still putting up numbers that most 20-year-olds can't do. So I think that is the great part about the sport. Now, the other part of it is, as in any sport, when you've done it for a decent amount at a high level, you have to be able to take steps back to move forward. So if you keep the foot on the accelerator, like anything, it's gonna burn you out. Now, powerlifting on the body, I think is fine. The issues that I've run into are often from other things that I've done and not necessarily powerlifting. I've got a bad shoulder from playing football for 20 plus years. Well, I've got to have that, and I've dealt with that for a long time. I'm supposed to have had a replacement probably for the last 4 years, but I've kind of put that one off. Now, is that from powerlifting? Well, powerlifting didn't help because of the positions I have to get into in the squat and benching and all. But that was something I got from athletic activity outside of powerlifting. So the sport itself, I think, is fine. I think it's safe. But like anything, the extremes are where people often look to and think, oh, this is what happens. But it's really a lot of the fringe and extreme.
I see. That's a good answer, actually. I wanted to ask, it's a question that we try to ask every guest, and I'm really curious about your answer on this. If you had one piece of advice that you could give to your pre-vegan self, what would that be?
I would probably look to say, trust what you know. Trust what you know. Because I think that for me, too often I got to places where I didn't pull the trigger on becoming vegan and doing this, and I found excuses, even though I knew how science worked. I knew that, I could get the protein profiles that I needed. I knew how to get them out, but just seeing the little slide back scared me. And I didn't trust what I knew. And when I finally did, it was just perfectly fine. But I think had I had that coaxing in my 20s, it may have been a different story.
Brilliant. I think that's a wonderful statement to end on. Trust what you know. Brilliant. Thank you for joining us, Ryan. But before we leave, do you have any final words for anyone out there looking to maybe go vegan, who's maybe in the gym doing a little bit? What would any advice that you have be?
I think the biggest piece of advice that I would give is that plants have all the protein you need. You don't have to go outside of there. You'll be fine. You gotta, trust those that have done it before. If you have questions, ask. So there's no dumb questions. Get the answers, get the information. You can do it. I'm living proof.
Brilliant. Thank you everyone for watching the Viva podcast. You've been here with me, James, and Ryan, who we've been talking about powerlifting. I hope you've managed to take something away from it, because I definitely have. And we'll see you in the next one. Thank you.